The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
And I'm CJ.
And it is hump day in the Riv.
Oh, and it's not after a special city council. Well, it was a city council meeting,
Yeah.
but it was a subcommittee meeting. Yeah. Sub life.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we got a lot of things going on today. I guess Zelensky spoke to Congress this morning.
Yes.
And of course, and all the politicians are doing their political dance. La 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 la. Look at this, and so their propaganda, their dance of the propaganda, and everybody is diverted from the fact that, remember, Joe Biden's on TikTok now. He's got the TikTok influencers saying everything's Putin's fault. Everything's Putin's fault. And there was a war on.
You need a mic.
Oh shit. There was a war. There's a war going on the Mexican border. I saw a film of it today. Trucks burning, exchanging gunfire. The cartels are having a war in Nuevo Laredo, right over the border. So the country is in a total state of disarray.
Nuevo Laredo?
Yep.
New Laredo.
Yep, New Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, right over the border. And the other big thing was, I heard this morning, before I left, which is really important for all you people that can't afford anything now, it's going to get much worse. The United States economy and the dollar is probably on the verge to collapse, because the big news I heard this morning, I don't know if you heard it, because I heard it just before I left the house. The Saudi Arabians are now contemplating accepting Chinese money for their oil, Chinese currency.
Right.
And if you don't know it, petrodollars are always an American currency. And that's what stabilized the United States' currency and makes us still, even though we've lost most of our manufacturing, still viable in the world, makes the U.S. dollar viable in the world, because that's the currency they use for petrodollars. And if they begin to accept Chinese money,
we're in trouble.
We're toast. Mm-hmm. You think it's bad now? I mean, the dollar's worth about like 22 cents. After this, it'll be worth like a cent. It'll be like Germany before World War II, when they walked around with a wheelbarrow of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread.
Well, you may not have to do that, because if you listen to Joe Biden recently, he wants to shift the United States from paper money to cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's so they can track your money.
That's right.
That's all it is. Is that, you know, everything they do is to track your money. This is all BS. But listen, I got to just get this one in, and we can, because it's just. Again, I was so happy to look at this and say, you see, all the stuff we talk about our government and how useless this government is, especially New England. It did my heart good to look at the two people who, with all the stuff going on in the world, nearly last year we had more people cross the border than even in any time in history, and this year we're doubling that. We have a war on the Mexican border. We got rampant inflation that Brandon blames on everybody else. It's nothing is their fault. And what do they do in Washington? What does our buddy Markey, our buddy who was on TV today, our buddy, the guy that was running on term limits, that's been there for like 175 years now, our boy from the Cape, Markey.
Who actually isn't from the Cape. He's from the Cape, but he lives in Maryland.
Yeah, he lives in, well, that's because he's always in Washington. He's been there, term limits. I guess he figured he was going to limit the terms to 100 years in office. And the other guy, Boofer Boy, Sheldon, the man with absolutely no ability to connect with an average person, with his little scarf across his and his little, he's got his little, like, thermal on under his jacket. He's a fashion statement. Sheldon Whitehouse and Markey, what did they do? With all the stuff going on in the world, those two cretins, they're happy as hell. They're going to make daylight savings permanent.
Or they're trying to, yes.
Well, it passed unanimously in the Senate. It's got to go to the House.
Yeah.
And guess what, people?
They'll pass in the House.
If it passes, you better have to take your kids and stand on a corner when they go to school, because if they do that, it's already somebody who actually knows about like actual times. A weatherman on a local station has already said that's insane, because in the winter it's not going to get daylight till 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
So your kids are going to be waiting for the buses and stuff in darkness, in pitch black darkness, in the cold. So there's what these pinheads do in Washington. The two idiots, the guy that had to be explained what a boofer was, and yeah, he was totally. What are they talking about? Please explain that to me. And if you don't know what a boofer is and you're from Rhode Island or southeastern Mass, there's something you're seriously out of touch with the demographic that you live in. So, but this is what they do. This is what they do up there. All they do is con you. They're conning you. They're directing you. And now, what are they doing now? Their new diversion is Ukraine.
Everyone's going to have something. Everyone's got to have something, that's for sure. And, you know, about the daylight savings time thing, I'm all for a fixed time, but it doesn't have to be daylight savings time. It could be standard time. Okay? And my reason behind that is, as you said, children won't be standing in the dark to go to school. Yeah. And all daylight savings time adds more time at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yeah.
So instead of it going dark at 4:15 or 4:30, it'll be 5:15 or 5:30. I just can't see that. I mean, granted, I hate the time shifts twice a year, but I would rather see standard time than savings time.
Yeah, you know, I agree. Look, there has to be. This is the problem. Those two are the epitome of the wokies. They can't be inconvenienced at all. Everything has to be on their time. They probably don't get out of bed till 8 o'clock in the morning, and by the time they meander over to Congress or get their ride over to Congress, nobody cares. But the problem is, we understand how cold it gets, and when the sun isn't out, at least hasn't begun to come out, it's even worse normally. So you're going to have children standing in pitch darkness in the middle of winter for what? For your it's going to help, you know, depression and stuff. Well, you know, if they're depressed because it's dark at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Take a Abilify.
Tell them to move to one of the Scandinavian countries where it's dark for like 6 months a year.
Yeah.
You know, where it's dark almost all the time, even some parts of Alaska.
That's right.
Some parts of Alaska have virtually, you know, it's dark, it's seasonal out there. So this is absurd. I mean, they have no priorities. They're like infants. They're like children. They have no priorities. It's like, don't worry about the fact that you can't pay your bills. Worry about the fact that you can't get some cookies out of the jar today. They're like a bunch of infants up there. All they care about is raising money for their party, raising money for themselves, and getting reelected and getting rich, like they all did with this war. Some of the Green New Deal people bought oil stocks, even though they were against oil, because they knew they would go through the roof. They had insider information. Are they going to be held accountable? No. Because when you're in government or you're rich, you can get away with virtually anything, because that's the reality of the situation. It is the reality of the situation. Yeah. So now our new diversion is the war, and it's a tragic thing, but the fact is, it's not the only thing. You know, the United States has so many critical problems facing it, and there's virtually nothing. This is a propaganda move by the mainstream media, who is liberal at, you know, always ultra liberal for the most part, to divert attention from the fact that the border is even more out of control than it was last year, that we have hundreds of thousands of Americans dying from fentanyl that's coming from China and dispersed through Mexico. All this is happening to American citizens. And I have the utmost sympathy for what's happening over in Ukraine. But the fact is that we have serious issues here that are being totally ignored. The border, they've never talked about the border issues for 2 years on mainstream media, and it's reached epic proportion. They think that over 1 million people got away last year and got into the country, and now we're on track to get 2 million. But nobody cares. Nobody cares about Americans dying of fentanyl. Nobody cares about anything. You know, is a war tragic? Yeah, all war is tragic. All war is immoral. But the fact is, that's unfortunate. It's war. And as Pythagoras once said, man is the measure of all things. So you know what that means? It means that the winners get to write the history books.
That's always been the way it is.
And that's right. And remember one thing about war. It doesn't prove who's right. It only proves who's left.
That's it. That's it. It's kind of tough to see it that way.
Yeah,
but
it's
I
true.
will. Do you remember the Rasmussen poll you talked about?
Yep.
The other day.
Yep.
I saw a meme about it,
Oh, really?
which was totally shifted.
Of
it was,
course.
I mean, they changed it all, saying that 66% of people making $200,000 or more want to go to war. I was like, that's not what I read. Where is this coming from? And then, of course, I just had it out with somebody who was putting out there that gas is $7.75 a gallon in London, and you think Joe Biden has something to do with it. I said, number one, fuel in Europe is sold by the liter.
Yeah.
Secondly, fuel in Europe has always been expensive.
Very.
I said, I remember paying $6.50 a liter when I was in Europe.
That's right. And that was a while ago.
That's right. That was in the 1980s.
Yeah.
So let me tell you something. I put it all in there that it was, and the guy's a nice guy. I know him very well. He's very community active and whatnot. I don't think he was aware that that was so.
Well, I guess he also wasn't aware that Biden's basically stopping drilling, and then somebody really put one of the Democrats in their place because they're talking about all these permits, but the permits are for places that don't have any oil, and there's another step you have to get, because then you have to get a drilling permit,
Right.
and those things aren't available. He's not allowing people to drill. He shut down pipelines. He caused this, and no matter how many ways you want to con this thing, that's the way it is. The Rasmussen poll about war is obviously 37%, and I don't have it in front of me yet. You know I got a good name.
Yep.
No, 37% of the people who make less than $30,000 or $50,000 a year do not want to go to war because it's their children they're going to fight in the wars. Because rich old men start wars, poor young men die them.
Yep.
And that's the problem. The problem is that, listen, until the world and these politicians whose kids don't normally go to fight realize that all war is immoral, we're always going to have wars. And to get back to what I said about man is the measure of all things, I know they're making a tremendous amount about the civilian casualties, which unfortunately are part of war. But to show you how history is written by the winner, there was no talk of war crimes when the United States bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima,
Right.
and incinerated 250,000 women, children, dogs, cats, and everything that was alive on those two cities. And when they carpet bombed every major city in Germany and flattened them, am I saying it was wrong? No, Because that's the problem. People who don't know war try to put moral equivalencies on what happens in war. You have to understand that war is immoral by definition. Until you realize that all war is wrong, you're going to do things like this and try to use this. The bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima was to send a message to Japan what would happen to their population. Was it horrible? Yes, horrific. That we would take that toll of human life. But to fight house to house and street to street, like you're seeing right now, setting up in Ukraine, in Japan, would have been catastrophic. We would have lost hundreds of thousands of American soldiers in that battle for Japan. That was a decision made by the President of the United States to say, we're gonna show them the awesome power that we have, and they'll back off. Problem was, we were the only people with nukes at the time. Now everybody's got nukes. The problem is we carpet bombed Germany too. Why? To do the same thing. To flatten everything, show them that we were coming and we were willing to unfortunately kill everybody there. But we won. So now, that's one of the things you don't read about World War II. You hear about only the stuff that the winner wants you to talk about. So for us to take some kind of, to look at this and pretend that these things have never happened and that we would never, ever do anything like that is hypocritical to the infinite power. So this is a problem. All war is bad. It is immoral. And it should be eliminated. And that, unfortunately, it never will, because humans are just humans.
But they're bad for humans. But for the economies, they're wonderful.
For the rich people whose kids don't fight, whose kids don't fight in the wars. That's right. It's the rich people who don't go to war, just like in a civil war. Half of the millionaires in the United States were created during the Civil War. One of my favorite books, Labor's Untold Story, talks about how all these millionaires made their money during the Civil War selling arms. Surprise, selling arms.
Imagine that.
Selling arms to the Confederacy and the Union Army. Because rich people have no loyalty. Their loyalty is to their bottom line in a bank account. That's why all the richies want a global economy. They don't care about the United States. George Soros doesn't care. They all want a global economy because they can pay the average person less and make more money. That's the reality. And until the people and voters learn that you have to throw these people out of office, the privileged class in Washington, the privileged class in Boston, and the privileged class that sits in local government, when they show that they don't care about the voters, when they do things like saying, what do you expect? You expect me to ask the people about what they want on every issue? Well, that's what the Constitution says in this state. Yes, we do. That's why in the next election, we may have a repetition of what happened in Virginia and a lot of these other states. Because finally, because it's attacking their pocketbook, finally, the people are beginning to wake up and are getting pissed off because nobody can afford anything anymore. Nobody can afford it. And it's only going to get worse. And they're up there basically politicizing things and selling you a bill of goods, diverting your attention. Are we all horrified by what's going on in Ukraine? Yeah. But why are we surprised? How Russia invaded something during the Bush administration, during the Obama administration, and now during the Biden administration. They stopped when Trump was in there because they were afraid of him, because they were afraid he was as nutty as Putin.
He was walking around with his finger on the button.
And he wasn't afraid to press it.
Exactly.
But the fact is, this didn't catch anybody by surprise, yet nobody was prepared. So nobody looks at that. Now we're gonna use that, but that's a fact. Do you understand? And everybody's trying to psychoanalyze Putin. There's no psychoanalyzing Putin. Putin's wanted to restore the Russia to the old Russia forever. They believe that Ukraine is part of Russia, just like the Palestinians believe that Israel belongs to them.
That's right.
And that's never going to change. So don't try to psychoanalyze them. Pay attention to history. Try to learn something about motivations. That's one of the problems with our society. Most people have never, ever seen another culture. They don't understand. Middle Eastern culture, Far Eastern culture, the way they think is different than we do. So you're trying to make sense of what Putin does. Putin thinks that that's Russia. That's not Ukraine. Ukraine is part of Russia. Just like Germany thought Austria was part of Germany. Just like the Palestinians want their land back. And they'll never not want it back and not be in control of that land. This is the problem. The problem is that these things they're simple yet complex. And the media just gives you a distorted picture, and they only focus on what they want to focus on. So listen, just keep your thoughts and prayers out there for the people in Ukraine. Send them any help you can, because the chips are going to fall where they may, and the reality is that just accept it for what it is.
Well, I had a problem with the recent negotiations for a ceasefire. Zelensky was willing to take security interests for the Ukraine instead of joining NATO. So he would swap off security from Moscow to provide security for the Ukraine, and they would not join NATO. Now, you and I both know what that means. That means Russia marches across the land, and guess what? You're Russia.
Yeah.
You're Russia.
Well, look, nobody wanted Ukraine in NATO, including NATO.
Right.
They were never going to get into NATO. This whole thing is just a big giant scam and an alphabet soup to confuse people so they can get their propaganda. And listen, propaganda is part of war. Like Joseph Goebbels said, the propaganda minister for Hitler. You tell a big enough lie often enough, people will believe it. The reality is that, look, both sides have got propaganda. Russia's saying we're winning, Ukraine says we're winning, and nobody wants it. They want to settle behind closed doors. They're going to get it. And Zelensky knows that, number one, they weren't going to get into NATO anyway.
Right.
So they're trying to make a deal, and I hope they do, because the people that are suffering are the women and the children and the elderly and the people who are unavoidably, it's unavoidable because they can't basically get them all out at one time. And that's one of the tragedies of war. And it's horrible. But the thing that bothers me is it's almost romanticized. The Ukrainians are doing such a great job. They're fighting for their own country. Of course they are. It was like the Patriots who overthrew the British government, the largest army in the world. We only did it because they don't have the technology they have today. They couldn't bring everybody over from England in like 2 days and overwhelm our forces. But, they're in their own country fighting for their own houses, and they should be really. People should really understand how amazing that is, that they love their country, and they're fighting for their country, and they're fighting for their freedom. But the fact is that, listen, they're not going to beat Russia because Russia doesn't care about how many casualties they take.
Right.
Russia will not stop doing that because, just like in the United States, Dick Cheney had 5 deferments from the Vietnam War. Yet him and his daughter are the biggest war hawks in the world because Halliburton made trillions of dollars from Afghanistan and Iraq. The same thing with Mitt Romney calling Tulsi Gabbard, who is a veteran and a current lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves. She spent 2 decades 2 decades in the military wearing a uniform of this country. And he had the audacity, Mitt, who got 4 deferments, and they get as many as Dick, 4 deferments from Vietnam. So he never served, and neither did Tag and Biff and Skip and all those other kids. All the big rich yuppies, they don't go. And if they go, they're 500 miles behind the lines. So that's the problem. The problem is the people are going to wake up. The world is a horrible place, and if you allow despots to do what they got to do, they're going to do it. But let's put it in perspective. There's a lot of problems going on in the United States, and it's time for those bozos in Washington to do something about the border, about fentanyl, and about our inflation.
I think those are the most important issues for the United States right now.
That's right.
Okay, and we're not addressing them. And you talked about propaganda. Let's look at how Russia has taken control of the media. They have shut everything off. They shut off social media. They shut off the internet. They shut off outside news sources. It's only state television. It's only state press. That's the information. And in their press, they're saying that they don't bomb civilian sites. They don't bomb civilian hospitals. And you and I have seen the videos. We know that happens. That happens in every war. But they always say they don't. Like you said, propaganda. But we have the same propaganda in the United States. The only difference is our president and our Congress can't shut down the media. They try, but they can't. They had the media on their side for the longest time, but now with the sale of CNN, we may see a change in the media.
Yeah, even Bill Maher's saying, you think it's does anybody ask the question why Russia wasn't this way when Trump was in? And he hates Trump.
Yep.
He's an ultra-liberal, but he's asking but as you said, the only good thing about war in the Middle Easterners don't care. They use women and children as human shields.
Yep.
And they'll tell you that. They'll say, okay, if you want to bomb us, we're using this building as we've got troops in this building, and we've got something in this building that has military worth, but we're going to put women and children in here, and if you want to bomb them, well, then you have to. The only good thing about them is they're up front about the atrocities. About their atrocities. It's like, as you said, each side has propaganda. We saw the Ukrainians at 13 sailors that supposedly said "F you" to the Russian warship. They didn't die.
Right.
And that was correct. And that was confirmed by the Ukrainian Navy. Mm-hmm. They didn't die. That was a propaganda move to get everybody galvanized to fight their country. And there were a couple of other things that they said. That ghost in the sky, that never happened either. There was no such person. It was actually a Western person who got photoshopped into the cockpit of a MiG. So, look, propaganda is a part of war. But the war itself is not propaganda. The war is horrific, and anybody who's seen the face of war knows that. And you got to understand that it's the people who are suffering, and it's the politicians that perpetuate this crap. This should have come to a resolution a long time ago, because every other country in the world should have sat down and said, listen, we're going to shut the whole world down if you don't get your head out of your butt and stop this. You two guys get in a room and make a deal.
Yeah, well, and again, the United States cuts off Russian oil. As a matter of fact, recently, a Russian tanker tried to dock in Maine, the northernmost part of Maine, and they were refused admission. So is that propaganda? Is that accurate? I'm not sure. But we have to pick apart these stories. So, well, it looks like we're running out of time here. Chip, you are an expert on war. We know this already, or close to it. So we thank you for your input.
Yeah, well, no, it's just it's a reality, and anybody can study history. And if you don't study history, you'll be ignorant of the root causes. As I said, it's an old adage, but it's true. Rich people start wars, and poor young men and women die in them, and that's a tragedy.
I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day, and remember, stay safe, stay angry, and hold your politicians accountable. Thanks for watching.